Star Trek Picard is the biggest misfire of a popular media franchise that I've ever seen, and a monumentally incompetent betrayal of an original creative vision. It would be very easy to point to any of the particular blunders of the show as an explanation for why it represents such a catastrophic creative misfire. One could point to the stupid characters or the poor writing, the dumb ideas and ham-fisted political commentary, bringing back legacy characters without a clear purpose or planning. Yet the true failing of Star Trek Picard isn't to be found in any of these details. The larger and more important reason this show is never going to succeed is that it gets Star Trek wrong. Star Trek is fundamentally a vision of the future in which humanity has matured. We have solved many of the problems of contemporary society because we have grown up as human beings. It is not because we have institutions that work. That we have working institutions is a reflection of the more primary source of optimism, which is, as mentioned before, that we have grown up as a species. Over the years, and particularly since the death of Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek has gradually crowded out this original optimistic vision of the future with the convenience of bubbly characters and darker storylines, and this is the exact source of the franchise's decline. Although Star Trek Picard is a particularly egregious example, Star Trek Discovery also fails for this reason. The crew are a bunch of stupid, incompetent children with relationship melodramas who swear pointlessly and get starry-eyed over math and science. For some reason. Star Trek Picard also has a dim view of man. Most of the characters are dysfunctional, dour, resentful, emotionally stunted children who have failed to mature and grow up. They are far from being exemplars of an optimistic and mature future. Therefore, neither Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek Picard depicts a future in which humanity has grown up. It rather depicts a very subtle opposite. It depicts a future in which we have supposedly solved the issues plaguing humanity because at some point we put the right secular institutions in place. It is the institutions presumably keeping things together rather than man's greater maturity. This is the subtle but fundamental shift that distinguishes classic Trek from new Trek. Classic Trek is a favorable vision of man, new Trek is a favorable vision of institutions. This difference also appears to escape many of the people who typically enjoy the universe of Star Trek, meaning that the fundamental difference isn't always clear to them. Original Star Trek has an esoteric dimension to it related to man's interiority and his self-mastery. New Trek is hyper-secular pap with dumb characters and low-functioning ideology. I recently watched Red Letter Media's commentary on Star Trek Picard in which they referred to it as secular blasphemy, and while I understand what they mean by this, I think the sentiment is mistaken. Star Trek was never purely secular, as there was a strong esoteric dimension to it. Gene Roddenberry was very clear that in the future man has mastered himself. This is the source of the positive vision of the future, not just the scientific or secular component. New Trek has lost the esoteric dimension, yet keeps the secular scientific shopfront. It feels like a blasphemy because we've lost the self-mastery. At the end of the day, Star Trek was never purely about 23rd and 24th century knickknacks. Yes, the technology was present, but the source of dramatic weight came from man interacting with man. The decline from Star Trek The Next Generation is actually quite breathtaking in this respect. In TNG, humanity has matured, and Captain Picard is a particularly notable and interesting exemplar. He is such a compelling character because he has matured in an almost superhuman fashion. He is extremely learned and well-read, conducts himself with remarkable dignity, is able to quickly and easily perceive the moral failings of other characters or situations, and moreover has a supernatural ability to articulate those failings clearly enough for the solution to be made apparent to the rest of the characters and the audience. By the metric of classic Trek then, which is an optimistic vision of a matured humanity, Picard is superhuman. Within the context of Star Trek Picard, however, which does not depict a matured humanity, Picard's character loses its luster. He still gives speeches, of course, but there's very little dramatic weight behind them. For one thing, he himself is no longer the mature character he once was. A good example is the scene in which he pointlessly defies a sign saying no humans. This scene is supposed to thematically represent a brave stance against racism and discrimination, but actually it flies in the face of Star Trek generally and Picard specifically. In the future, we have it together, and we avoid entanglements with less mature civilizations and their squabbles. This is the prime directive in Star Trek, and its purpose is to highlight the difference in maturity between different civilizations. In the future, we routinely have to deal with less mature civilizations, and it can be a great source of drama. Picard was a mature enough man to understand that racism exists in the universe, and it's not on him to pointlessly stamp it out wherever he finds it. Picard would have dealt with the situation with far greater maturity and distinction, highlighting his own superiority. But Picard also never lost control of a situation. By taking such a pointless and recreational stance against racism, he very rapidly loses control of the situation, resulting in someone's death. In a very stupid scene, I might add. In short, it just isn't Picard. There's a great example which highlights the difference in one of the TNG episodes, where we meet representatives from two societies, one delegation selling illicit drugs to the other as medicine. The drug addicts have mistaken their withdrawal symptoms for disease, and the drug dealers are capitalizing upon this. Picard quickly discerns the nature of the problem, because again, we really have it together in the future, but decides not to disclose the information, disclosure being prescribed by the Prime Directive. This is a great source of drama. We have it together in the future, but we routinely have to deal with less mature civilizations and have decided to avoid interfering with the course of their development. They are simply not judged mature enough. It is we who have matured in the future. Picard eventually finds a solution to the problem in the same Prime Directive that proscribes interference, refusing to offer repairs to the ships which are necessary to transport the drug from one society to the other. This vision of differential maturity creates the ground for most of the social commentary in Star Trek. The less mature civilizations encountered by the crew of TNG are the source of comparison to our own contemporary society. It's actually an extremely effective medium for social commentary. We are able to see our present selves through the lens of an alien civilization interacting with our matured future selves. The hacks producing this newfangled schlock, however, aren't particularly fond of subtlety and elect instead for blunt and obtuse social commentary by literally visiting contemporary Earth via time travel and confronting each and every social issue on their radar. It's ideology at its most base and revolting. This is the difference between classic Star Trek and the stuff they're mass-producing now. It's also worth pointing out that Star Trek was never actually woke, it was mature. There's a very big difference. It was a vision of a matured society. Well, that's it really. That's all I have to say on the subject. In order for Star Trek to work, it must depict a future in which man has matured. We can't have the petty squabbles that the hacks producing this stuff seem to consider marketable, because then the entire edifice of the property collapses. I know they're going to keep making this stuff, but to me it's far too embarrassing to keep watching. I'll stick to classic Trek when I need a fix.